Okay, it looks like everybody has joined, and it's okay if you're just jumping in or you're going to jump in a little bit late. We are recording this presentation and we will be sending it out to everybody that had signed up. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to our Monday classroom sessions. My name is Noah, and this morning we're going to be looking at a couple of important things in shortcuts: attendance, schedules, and commissions. How do you work with these, especially if you are a salon or a spa or a barbershop that has hourly employees, or perhaps your front desk is hourly, and you want to make sure you're tracking their attendance, or if you're paying your employees a commission, how do you set that up? So, as with our other presentations, we're going to go through the basics. This presentation will be about 30 minutes. We are going to allow a little bit of extra time for any questions that you may have. My microphone, of course, is on. Everybody else has been muted. Your speakers, of course, have to be turned on to hear me. If there's something that you feel I've glanced over, or if you have a particular question in the middle of the presentation, you can ask that using the chat question box on the right side of your screen, or you can wait until the very end and I will review any questions you may have. And of course, if you have any follow-up questions, if you think of anything after the presentation, you can always reach us on our Facebook page as well as our email, and I will give you that information at the end of the presentation. So, what is the hopeful outcome for today? So we're going to look at these three things: attendance, schedules, and commissions. So how exactly does the staff clock in and out? How do you track their time? If an employee accidentally forgets to clock out or forgets to clock in, how do you fix that attendance? If you have a staff that more or less stays to their same schedule, whether it's the schedule for a month or a few months or even a year, how do you put that into shortcuts? And of course, setting up a commission. How does that work? So clocking in and out, whether you're a salon, a spa, or a barbershop, whether you're using the appointment book or the walk-in manager, if your employees are supposed to clock on, there's a few ways to do that. The first is there is a performance button on your main menu, and this is where the staff can press clock on or clock off. If you're using the walk-in manager, this would be more of, let's say, a nail salon or a barbershop where you only deal with walk-in customers. At the bottom of the screen, you also have the ability to clock in and clock out. So whether your staff is using the appointment book, whether they're using the walk-in manager, there's always a way to track that attendance. So where exactly do you find those employee hours? If a staff is clocking in, if you're paying them based on their hours, how do you find out when they were in, when they were available? So there's actually a report. You go to employees, employee hours, you set a date range, whether it's this past week or the past 2 weeks, and you press view. Everything that we're looking at this morning, I will do a live demonstration on. So if you missed a particular slide, don't worry, we will review it in real time. And then fixing employee attendance. When the employees forget to clock on or off, when you're looking at that attendance report, if you notice an employee has been clocked on for exactly 300 hours and you realize, wait a minute, there's no way they had that many hours in this past 2 weeks, so you need to fix it. This is where you would use the attendance feature, and you can adjust a day or even a time if it was just off by a few hours. So let's actually pause here and let's go into the actual shortcuts to look at the things we've been talking about. So on the main menu, if you have the appointment book feature, and if you have staff and they're supposed to clock in and out, on the right side, there is a performance button. Now, for today's practice, I don't have security turned on. Normally, it only shows one staff member at a time, whoever is logged in with a particular security pin. So we'll pretend that George is our employee, and as soon as I choose George's name, on the top right corner, I have the ability to clock on. And I can tell Shortcuts, okay, George is clocking in at 9 this morning. And just like that, George would be on the clock. And if George decides he is going to go on break, he's going to go to lunch, if you want to make sure that you're tracking that time that he's out, when you go to performance, you notice the clock on button becomes a clock off button. So for your staff, if they're being paid hourly, you want to make sure they know about the performance button and the ability to clock on or to clock off. If you are a barbershop or a nail salon, and again, a business that only deals with walk-ins, this is where you would go to the walk-in manager screen, and on the bottom left corner, you'll actually see the names of staff members that are scheduled to work today: George, Brad, Andy, and Matt. When Brad comes in, if he's ready to clock in, Brad can actually click on his name and then decide he's going to clock on. And it's available on the top right corner of his name block. And when Brad decides he's going to lunch or he's going to take a 15-minute break, he can say, I'm going to clock off, or I'm going to be away for X amount of minutes. Normally clock off when it's the end of the day. On the right side, I mentioned there is an attendance button. Before we even talk about attendance, we want to look at the report screen, because if you have hourly staff and if you're paying them based on their hours, before you run any sort of commission or wages report, you always want to make sure that the staff has been clocking in and out correctly. So we're going to go to Tools, on the right side, Tools and Reports. And once we're in the Reports window, on the left side of the screen, we're going to Employees, and under Employees, we're going to the Employee Hours. So at the bottom of the screen, I'm going to press View. So normally, when I'm calculating an employee's commission or wage, I set it for the last week or the last 2 weeks. For the sake of today's training, I'm just going to look at their attendance for today and today only. So Shortcuts will show me, oh, Brad and George really are the only ones that clocked in. And it shows me they've been here for 0 hours, 0 minutes, because I literally clocked them in and out right away. But normally this window says, what are the totals for each employee? So right away, if you can tell there's a discrepancy, I had Brad scheduled for 40 hours this week, and I noticed that his schedule said he was in for 60 hours. I can say, okay, on which day did he forget to clock out? And then I can adjust that. So for hourly employees, make sure that you know about the employee hours report. That's important. So let's go back to the presentation, because we're going to talk about how to edit this. So if you need to edit their actual time, so if a staff member forgot to clock in or forgot to clock out, or they've been clocked in for longer than they were supposed to, you're going to go to the attendance button. You're going to set the range that you want to look at, whether it's a week or 2 weeks in the past. You're going to find those employees, and when you find them, you can choose a particular day and tell Shortcuts, okay, they clocked in exactly at this time, or they clocked out exactly at this time. And then Shortcuts will calculate what the total hours were. Or if you knew for certain that an employee was clocked in for 3 hours and they should only get 3 hours for that day, you can click on the hours column and just type in a number. And we're going to see this live in a second. If an employee forgot to clock in on a certain day, and it happens, sometimes you're super busy, a staff member gets into work and they notice there's a line and they just want to start getting to work right away. So they can always go to Shortcuts and just start, or not even go to Shortcuts, they can just go to their chair and start working. But Shortcuts is not tracking their time. As an administrator, you have the ability to use attendance, choose an employee, and add what's called a new shift. Choose the day, that the employee was supposed to be clocked in or out, and then tell Shortcuts from what time to what time did they work. So Shortcuts will add those hours to their attendance. So whether the employee forgot to clock out or whether the employee forgot to clock in, you do have the ability to fix that. So let's actually look at a live demo. So we're going back to Shortcuts, and I go to Tools, and I go to Attendance, and I look at my schedule. George has been working for 0 hours and Brad has been working for 0 hours. If I discover that somebody, we'll say George for example, it says George clocked in at 9:08, and I know for certain, no, George was in early this morning. George was doing attendance or George was doing inventory. So I want to fix his clock in time. I can click on that column and tell Shortcuts, George clocked in at 8 this morning. I was here. I saw him come in. So when I press done, Shortcut says, okay, he's been here for 1 hour and 13. So it knows right away. Now, if I knew that George was going to get paid for being here for 3 hours today, I can click on his column, his hours column, and just type in a 3. So I know once 11 rolls around, George is going to leave. So now Shortcuts is going to have this in its records. For today, he was in from 8 to 11, 3 hours. Now Brad on the other hand, he clocked in and he clocked out and he clocked in and he clocked out back to back. So it says he's been here 0 hours. So for today, there's a couple of things I can do. I can take his second clock in and out time, and at the bottom of the screen, I can delete it. And I will, yes, delete this shift. And I will say today, Brad, just like George, he got in at 8 o'clock in the morning. So now Shortcut says, okay, he's been here for at least 1 hour. So now his time is correct. And later on, I can always adjust his total time. Now, for the case of Brad or George, if I was open yesterday and they forgot to clock in because they were super busy, they were just right at their chair as soon as they came in, I can click on George's name, and at the bottom of the screen, I can press New. And Shortcuts will ask me, do I want to add a shift for George? Yes, I do. For which day do I want to add a shift? So I'll choose Sunday, Sunday the 9th. And from what time to what time, and of course, somebody decides that they want to call me right in the middle of a presentation. How rude is that? Okay, go back to voicemail. Sorry for the interruption. So I'm telling Shortcuts, he was in from 9 to 5 yesterday. Done. And now George has a new entry. Today I fixed his hours and I added a shift for yesterday. And I can do the same for Brad. I'll choose Brad's name on the first row, press New, and say, yes, I'm adding a shift for Brad yesterday. And he worked 9 to 5 yesterday as well. So now both of my staff members have been credited hours for the times and the days they were supposed to be here. And if I go right back to reports and I run that employee hour report, and instead of today, I'm going to set the date range from Sunday to today. Now, Shortcuts gives me updated totals. Now, this is something that may happen to you. You may go to the attendance window and one of your employees is not listed here. And they completely forgot to clock in and out during a pay period or during a certain day. So in order to put this employee into attendance so that you can fix their hours, the first thing you have to do is create at least one entry for them. Even if you are only clocking them in and out for a second, that's all Shortcuts needs, just one entry for the employee. So George and Brad or Andy, they've logged in. If Matt forgot to clock in, how do I fix it? Under the main button, I'll return to the performance window. I'll find the employee that forgot to clock in and out, Matt, for example, and I will press clock on. And as soon as I clock him in, I'll clock him off. So again, he's only been in for a second. Once Shortcuts recognizes that for this pay period, Matt should have an entry, now I can return to the Tools and Attendance window, and you'll notice Matt's name has now been added to my list. Now that Matt's name is here, I can then choose his name and add shifts for every day that he missed. Well, he was in yesterday and again super busy, so he forgot to clock in. So I'm giving him his 8 hours. He was also in the day before. So again, I can add another shift for Saturday, 9 to 5. And he was even in on Friday. So my busiest days, I absolutely want to make sure that Matt gets paid for all 3 days. And then I'll choose Friday and give him his full 9 to 5. So originally, Matt's name did not appear on my list of employee hours. But as soon as I clocked him in and out, just for a second, I had the ability to go in here and start fixing the time and the entries that he was supposed to have. So even if a staff member forgets to clock in and out, all you have to do is go to the performance window and clock that staff person in just for a second. Then you can start editing that. All right, we're going to go back to the presentation. So that is working with attendance. Now, the other thing that you should know how to do in Shortcuts is entering employee schedules. So if your staff is supposed to have a set schedule, especially for appointments, so how exactly do you set that? So there's a couple of ways. One of the fast ways is you go to the Tools button, Schedule, or when you're in your Employees window, go to the Schedule. Then you choose one day at a time and enter the start and end of the shift, or if this is a day off or a vacation day, you set those specifically. You enter a schedule for at least 7 consecutive days. Even if employees are not working on a certain day, don't leave their day blank. Tell Shortcuts this is a day off, or this is a vacation day or a sick day. This way, if you have online booking knows which employees are scheduled for that day. Once you have a schedule entered, you can actually tell Shortcuts, I want to copy this shift down for the next week, for the next 2 weeks, for the next 2 months, or for the next year. So you can actually set a range. And to do that, this is where you would use the Mark Cell option in your schedule. We're actually going to do this and do a live demo so you can see exactly how to do that. So let's go into Shortcuts and learn how to enter an employee schedule. So back to Shortcuts. So for my staff, again, there's 2 ways to get to this window. On the right side, I can go to Tools and Schedule. Or if you're an administrator, you can go to Setup, Employees, and then Schedule. So on this window, I've already entered the schedules for my employees, but I'll choose, and I'm going to blank out, and I'll show you exactly how I'm doing what I'm doing right now. So I'm going to clear Georgia's schedule for the next few months. I'm actually going to clear it out for the rest of the year. Okay, so under Georgia's column, I don't have anything entered for this week or the next few weeks, and I absolutely want to make sure his schedule is set. So I would go one day at a time. I would click on the blank block for his Sunday, and I would say that was a normal shift for him. And what about Monday? Monday is a normal shift for him. But on Tuesdays is actually his day off. So I would click on his Tuesday, and I would say that under shift type on the right side is his day off. Wednesday, he's back to work. He has a normal shift, 9 to 8. And actually, that's a bit long. He's in 9 to 5. So I can always fix those hours. 9 to 5 is his shift. Thursday, 9 to 5. And he stays late on Fridays. So he goes 11 to 8 on Friday, and then 10 to 6 on Saturday. So I've entered George's schedule for 1 week. If this is going to be the schedule that he's going to hold on for the rest of the month or the next 2 months, this is how you copy it. On the top left corner, there's a button that says Mark Cells. If I press Mark Cells, Shortcuts will ask me, what is his first cell, or what is the first day of his schedule? So that would be his 11 to 5 o'clock on Sunday, this past Sunday. So I'll click on that 11 to 5, and then Shortcuts asks me, what is his second cell? His second cell is the last day of his work week. So I could click on his 10 to 6 on Saturday. So everything in between just got highlighted. So Shortcuts recognizes, okay, there's 7 days here. If I right click in that shaded area, Shortcuts will ask me, for how long do I want to copy this schedule? So now I'm going to choose a Saturday to end the schedule on. So I can use the calendar view and I can say, is that his schedule through June and July? Does it wrap up in August or September? Or does it even go into next year? So I'll say, no, it just goes until the last Saturday in July, which is actually rolling into August. So his schedule will repeat until August 3rd. And just like that, the schedule I just created will copy down for the next 5 or 6 weeks. Don't forget to press Unmark Cells. Otherwise, Shortcuts thinks you're still highlighting more cells in the range. Now, here's a nice trick that I want to show you. If I had another staff member and they more or less had the same schedule as George, I don't necessarily have to go to their column and go 1 day at a time to set it. Instead, I can press Mark Cells, choose George's first and last day of his schedule, and if I hold down the Alt key on my keyboard, I can drag and drop his schedule over a different employee. And now I can unmark cells and just adjust a day or two for this specific employee. So that's much faster than having to one by one do each day at a time. The other thing you can do is if you set all of your employees' schedule for that week, instead of going mark cells and just doing one person at a time, I could start with George's Sunday and go over to Matt Saturday. So I'm clicking diagonally and notice all 4 columns just got highlighted. Now I can copy all 4 schedules down for as long as I need to. So those are some of the advanced things you can do here. Highlight multiple cells, right click, and schedule until, and I'll go until the end of September. And always don't forget to unmark cells. So make sure you put in your staff schedules when they're supposed to be working, because this does synchronize online. So this is how your online booking works. If you're not quite sure, then you can always limit how far in advance customers can make an appointment. But just don't forget to put in schedules for your staff. Okay, I think everybody has that now. I'll stay on this window, but I'll go back to the presentation. So that's copying schedules. So the next portion, how do you create a commission in Shortcuts? So the window that I just left it on, the employee schedule, also happens to be the place where you create a commission schedule. So at the bottom of the window, there's a button that says commission. It has a little wrench on there. You would create a new commission because by default, there are no commissions in Shortcuts. You need to tell Shortcuts, does a staff member get a commission on service dollars they make or on retail that they make, or a combination of the two? So you enter those under the pay details. So let's actually create a commission. Now on this particular database that I'm using, I've already created a few commissions, but I can always edit those. So we're back on the schedule window, and at the bottom, I'm going to commission. So this is what I created, my one commission. I call it my standard commission. And I tell shortcuts from $0 to infinite dollars, represented by a bunch of nines. What is my commission for services? The employee gets 50% plus 10% for retail. The staff member would get nothing on sundry items. Sundry would include things like gift certificates. Now, this is my version of the standard commission. If your particular business instead rewards the employee based on what levels of service or retail that they do, you can always break it down by tiers, these bands here. So I can tell shortcuts from $0 to $1,000, the staff member gets 40% and they get 2% on retail. However, for everything they make above $1,000 to $2,000, they make 42% and 3% on retail. And I can expand on that and say for 2,000 to 3, they make 45%, 5% on retail. And of course, the goal is if they can do more than $3,000 to infinite dollars, they're going to hit 50%. So of course, the busier they are, the more retail they sell, the greater the chance that their commission is going to increase. So I can always use these tiers, these bands. So it depends on your business. No two salons, spas, or barbershops are exactly the same. So your commission rate breakdown may be a little bit different. Or you may be a business that does commissions starting at certain amounts. So we'll say from $0 to infinite dollars, you always give your employees 50%. However, they do not earn retail until they earn or a minimum of $100 to infinite dollars. Then they get a retail commission. So they wouldn't get anything before that $100. So you can absolutely split these commissions depending on what your particular business model is. Okay, I think everybody has that. So this is just one example of a commission. Let's say this is my commission for all of my staff members that actually do haircuts or do nail services or estheticians. So this is how much they get. But if I have a front desk person and the front desk person actually gets 15% on retail and nothing on services, then in that scenario, I would press new and I would create a second commission schedule. And I would say front desk, for example. So what is my front desk commission? From $0 to infinite dollars, they get nothing on services. However, they get 15% on retail. So I would save that. And now I have two commissions I can choose from. So normally they would get no commission if they were, let's say, an hourly person or a standard commission. When I return to this window, employees, there we go. Now I can tell shortcuts, okay, Brad should actually get my front desk commission. Everybody else on staff would get my default or my standard commission. And the particular report that your hourly rates go to, if somebody's supposed to be getting an hourly, you also put that in here, or their commission. When you go to tools and reports, under the employee category, you would go to the commission and wages report. And what this does is it actually gives you what their commission should be or what their wage should be based on hourly or commission, and for a particular period of time. So if Andy's an hourly person, he gets 15 an hour. This would be his wages. And if he was getting a commission, it would also give you a breakdown on this window. So it sort of does two things. It does the attendance numbers for you, and it does the commission breakdown for you. Okay, now that we have that, back to our PowerPoint. And that actually covers everything we were going to look at this morning. So our outcomes. You now know how to clock employees in and out. You know how to fix their attendance. You know how to enter a schedule for your staff members, and even how to set up a commission rate for them. So now we're going to open the floor for you. So you can always sign up for other webinars. We have a full library of previous webinars on our website. You're welcome to review those. So now we're opening the floor up to you. Do you have any questions on anything we've covered this morning regarding attendance, clocking in and out, adjusting schedules, entering schedules, or even creating commissions? Now's your chance. On the right side of the screen, you should have either a chat or a question bar. So go ahead and type in a question while I get a drink of water here. Either you're typing very, very slowly or you don't have any questions. I'm going to choose the second version of that because I'm such a good instructor, nobody has a question. I am very proud of myself. All right. So thank you all for your attendance. Of course, if you think of anything after this presentation, I spoke too soon. Somebody had a question. I'm not as good a teacher as I thought. Vicky has a question. Is there a security setting that only allows owner and manager to see employee hourly rate? Good question, Vicky. There is a security setting. So let's jump out for a second. Back to shortcuts. So on the right side, if you go to setup, if you're an administrator, and you go to configuration, on the left side of the screen, we're going to go down to the general button and into security. In shortcuts, there's 4 default levels: owner, manager, employee, receptionist. So normally, you would drag and drop and put the person's name on the level of permission that they should have, whether they're an employee or a receptionist. When you go to the Access tab at the top of the screen, this is where Shortcuts specifies what exactly does the owner have permission to see. As you can imagine, the owner can see and do everything. A manager has some of those configuration options taken away from them. The biggest difference is between employee and receptionist. An employee, literally the only reason they use shortcuts is to clock in, clock out, and that's it. An employee cannot check customers in or out, cannot make appointments, move appointments, or really use point of sale. They only are in the system so that shortcuts can track their time and their productivity. A receptionist would have permission to use point of sale, add appointments, move appointments, do all of that functionality. In some businesses, you don't necessarily use employees because every staff member should be able to use point of sale, so you make them receptionists. But as for limiting what they can see, on the right side, so there's a few things you can block them from seeing. Employee attendance, for example, we don't want staff members going in and changing their times that they were in and out. So we block them from seeing that. Employee performance, we do want them to be able to see their own performance, what they did that week, that hour, things like that. However, when it comes to hourly rates, so that would be more of a configuration setting. So can they change the commissions? Can they see their details? Things like that. This is more or less an all or nothing situation. If you're giving somebody on staff permission to set up an employee, to create an employee, or to go into the configuration, then they can see just about all of their details. The fields for phone number, email, what commissions they have, what their hourlies are. So usually you wouldn't give anybody below a manager permission to see any employee details. And in some cases, only the owner would have permission to see that. The thing that you could do, though, to mask some of their privacy is there is a feature here under receptionist that says view other employee breakdown. So you can mask this so that if an employee goes to the performance window, they're only allowed to see their own totals, their own weekly, daily, monthly totals. So I hope that answers your question, Vicky. So unfortunately, for that particular one that shows where their hourly is set up, things like that, that's an all or nothing. If they have permission to access or to edit that window, they can see what that hourly number is. But at the very least, you can mask it from performance so that staff members cannot see the breakdown for other employees or for the business. Okay, are there any other questions that anybody has? I think that's it. So we'll go back to the PowerPoint. So as always, if you think of anything after this presentation or something comes up, you can always reach us on our email, education@shortcuts.net. You can also reach out to us on Facebook. We do check the social media and we do answer questions there. Or just give us a call. We're always here for you, the help desk especially, 24/7. So thank you for your attendance. I'm going to close out today's presentation, and I look forward to seeing you again on our next Monday classroom session. Have a great day, everybody.